It is my pleasure to introduce you to Joe Justice. Joe was our second speaker when SFBABAM first started in the summer of 2021. He came to talk to us about Agile at Tesla, his experience working in Tesla in 2020, and what he has learned in Tesla. But before joining Tesla, Joe founded wikispeed, an all-volunteer Agile startup, in 2006. And then in 2011, they unveiled their own original car, which set 4 world records, and Agile hardware was born. Now, somehow, the car stuck, and now Wikispeed EV Racing won the overall in the All Japan EV Grand Prix. So, what's and why and how is Agile hardware winning over all comers, even in the quirky new world of electric racetrack games? Well, that's what we're here to learn about today. Now, instead of slides, Joe will do the presentation in Miraboard. He will share a read-only link of the Miraboard afterwards. He also likes to answer questions as they arise, so you don't need to wait. And we're using Mentimeter for that. So the QR code is on the screen, and I am pasting the link in the chat as well. Now, I will monitor the questions, so don't worry, and no need to wait. When you have questions, just put it in. All right, without further ado, let's welcome Joe onto our virtual stage. Joe?
Thanks so much, SFBABAM. Thanks to the organizing team. I've worked with Munwai on the Agile Tales podcast, which was quite long running as we dug into what I thought I experienced when I worked in Tesla as an employee, and then when I visited SpaceX as a Tesla employee. And I've gotten to be in SFBABAM before, and even the what did we call it? It wasn't round table, it wasn't Super Bowl. It was like Super Round Table Bowl. It was this juggernaut head to head of speakers coming back, and I got to do like a panel discussion also with SFBABAM. What was that called? It had a great name.
Battle Royale.
Yes, the Battle Royale. Yeah, we were totally in the Thunderdome, the Zoom version of the Thunderdome.
That's right.
Um, And when the organizers, it was, I think Pete and Munwai this time that reached back out, said for 2025, let's connect. The piece of the story that I thought might be interesting to people, because it's not like I've gone back to work in another Musk company. I mean, I've had some new insights and some new reflections, and I might be able to interpret some of the most recent events in an interesting way because of my experience before. But it's not like I have this brand new, interesting mass of great information that you all don't have. So what I'd like to do is connect some pieces in the story and then update you on how somehow I became the owner of the largest electric vehicle race team, I think, in the world. And that will be the I hope fun part. And I hope this is useful for Agilists too. Well, it's definitely very agile, definitely very lean. There might even be some Scrum in there somewhere.
So actually, Joe, if you don't mind, you were actually specifically named, one of the few speakers specifically named to actually come back. So we asked the members last year, who would you like to see us invite? And your name actually came up. And specifically, agile hardware and agile manufacturing was the topic that the members actually would love to hear about. So yeah.
Then it's my honor. And please don't be shy to make a comment or question or a correction at any time. You don't need to wait till the end. I haven't made this presentation as rigid as some of my previous ones. So here's what's going on now. The picture on the bottom left is me doing my best to hustle an EV around one of Japan's most famous racetracks. Um, that picture, I think, might be at Fuji Speedway, which is also an F1 track and a Super GT track. And at the bottom arranged, those are all different cars that I now own. Um, I I bought the largest EV race team I think in the world. That's not even all the cars. At least one of them isn't even pictured. Um, and we've been winning. We have enough cars that we're in all the different classes, and we've been continually winning in all the different classes. And that's let me see the engineering on the racetrack at least, so in a way of pushing its limits, of the new Xiaomi SU7, of the Hyundai 5N, of the Porsche Taycan versions as they come out. The electric Mercedes are cars I'd like to see in the series, but then I've been visiting them in Europe. And Polestar, I've been working with them in Gothenburg and Sweden. Um, all of the major players and BYD and Geely and the players that now own Jaguar Land Rover and Lotus and that type of thing. And so I'd have a different experience than someone who is shopping online for these vehicles or someone who's even driving or doing rideshare with these vehicles. I'm racing them and I'm racing against them, and we're taking them apart in many cases and getting experience with the engineering. And because I've myself physically participated in building tens of thousands of Teslas, at least as a Tesla employee, and wikispeed before that, I think I have some interesting point of view. Now, this racing story I think is really fun, but I'd like to go back in time first. There's this thing called the demo scene. It's still going. It happens all over the world. One of the famous demo events, demo conventions, um, happens in Finland each year. And the reason it's become so famous is because of a group of 9 teenagers in 1992. Here, I'll switch my screen share, and I'm not sure how well this is going to play through screen share. I'll see if I can even share computer sound. But I'm going to show you a clip of home recording of these 9 teenagers at one of their parents' house in 1992 programming together. I'll just play like 1 minute of it. Check this out. Kids are doing is they're writing in assembly. They're doing some Pascal, Turbo Pascal. They're also doing some C++. But most of it, they're then rewriting in assembly. They've made their own sound composing software, their own video rendering software. And this is when the 486 just came out, the 486 DX2 just came out. Here they're talking about how to convert this graphics display they wrote in Pascal into assembly and manipulate register by register. And they're talking about which compiler they're going to use next if they progressively compile it to be more and more performing. And what they're going to do is make some pretty graphics and they hope really nice sound in the smallest file size possible. I mean, they originally tried to make it 64K total file size. And then later they let this one get bigger, but many of their demos were 64K. To make it really, 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 really tiny. And so it could do 3D graphics in 1992. And we didn't have 3D accelerators. We didn't have graphics cards. It's assembly register manipulation directly to try to make something that looks 3D. And these kids, well, I'll show you what they did. I'm going to switch screens, and it's a total 16-minute event that they published at this Demo Scene Con, which was then published in 1993. And they didn't even use their real names. They called themselves the Future Crew, and they used handles like a lot of people did in 1992, 1993. So they have their names like Trug and Wildfire and Psy and Marvel, and they're these awesome names, these Finnish teenagers. And here's a clip, about 1 minute of this, and I hope the sound's on because they made their own original music. And this whole thing, it did become more than 64K, but the file size is incredibly tiny. 3D graphics, almost no one had ever seen them until these kids did it. even the images in this tiny file size because they're rendering these images. They drew them, but then they program basically like Modular sets to generate the images they made. The sound clips, it's too big to store them. So they're generating these sounds. They're basically programming their own synth in assembly in like 10K. This thing is in Dolby surround sound. The you like I can't stress enough how much this blew away people in 1993 when they published it. Now this little piece maybe looks kind of tame in my screen share. When you played it live on your own 386 that was choking down to try to run it, or 486, the speed it flew by was really bizarre. These mix effects are all hard-coded registry manipulations. People hadn't seen graphics like this even on MTV with whatever the high-end. Okay, I'll flip back to the presentation, but I highly recommend investing the 16 minutes in second reality, is what that's called. The second reality was created by these 9 kids in rural Finland in 1992. It was released in the demo scene in 1993, and it changed a lot of people's lives. It's on YouTube, and there's emulators written just so you can run it natively still, even on modern hardware. And all those repos, the YouTube listings and the code repos are full of comments saying, you're the reason I'm a coder, saying, you're the reason I got into computer science. You're the reason I got into chip design. 2 of these kids, which are now adults, ended up making 3D Mark, the graphics testing software, and they're highly successful. Let's look back at their way of working again. They're in one room together. They didn't have the internet, so they would go over to one of their parents' house. They'd bring their desktops and they'd call each other. If they weren't in the room, they'd actually use faxes to send sketches. And they would work together, giving each other feedback, first in Turbo Pascal, and then they'd rewrite it in C++ when they thought they had something they liked. And then when they really thought they had it down, they would rewrite it in assembly to get it smaller and smaller. And they would do this for fun. No one's paying these kids. And they're exercising some of what I would argue is some of the best software teaming, some of the best group work, some of the best communication skills, some of the best programming skills in the world. And this clip of these kids working, that's like what I experienced when I was working in a Musk company. Now, I don't know who here likes or does not like Elon Musk. That's not my point. Especially during the last election, I saw videos made from both sides, making everyone on both sides look completely evil. And so depending on which videos you saw or both, everybody legitimately looks completely evil. And I respect that. I saw clips too. Now, my personal experience working in the company is I actually really respect Elon, and I thought it was a great company. But if you have a very different opinion, that's okay. I mean, I've seen some of the videos made that really vilify everyone in Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company and Neuralink. So if you don't like Elon, that's okay. I hope we can still like great engineering. And this teamwork, I think, is what I wanted Agile to be when I discovered Agile much later. Um, to zoom out, these kids, they're not even working in Helsinki. Now, Finland, according to the world's population surveys, is 0.01% of the world's population, a little bit under. It's like 0.008% of the world's population is Finnish. And they almost all live right in the bottom of Finland, where it's a little bit warmer, and congregated in Helsinki, far and away the largest population. So the statistical variance for a global population survey is 0.01%. So it's actually arguable if anyone actually lives in Finland because it's within the statistical margin of error of a global population survey, the entire population. So that's how tiny this country is. And these people, these kids, maybe one of the reasons they're so hardcore and making such great product that even now engineers with AI assistants have difficulty getting to that level of efficiency, mathematical efficiency. They're not even in the main town. They're in this little town here. What's it called? Puri. Pori. Here's Sweden over here for those of you not completely intimate with a map of Finland. So we're in Scandinavia. Um, and let me go just a little bit back. I'm zoomed in here in the United States. This is Michigan, if any of you recognize the hand of Michigan. Right down here by the wrist of Michigan is Indiana. That's where I was born. And the year after I was born, what became the most popular computer in the world was built. That was the Commodore 64. Its predecessor, which was actually built a little bit later, its predecessor was the VIC-20. That was the first personal computer to sell 1 million units in 1980, the year after I was born. Well, when its predecessor, the Commodore 64, came out, people started doing some pretty cool graphic stuff in Quick Basic and started experimenting with C and C++, and it sold more than 1 million units. Well, my parents didn't spend a lot of money on technology or TVs or anything, but they got a used VIC-20 after the Commodore 64 came out because those more than 1 million early adopters that now had gotten Commodore 64s that wanted to push the limits of computing, they were selling off their old VIC-20s. And so my family got one when I was, I don't know, 8. And I started programming in Quick Basic. And I started trying to make graphics and made little boxes that got bigger and smaller, and countdowns that scrolled across the screen in Basic. Actually, I didn't get Quick Basic until later. And then the 486 DX2 came out, and these kids in Finland used 486 DX2 66s in 1992 and made MTV level graphics, CNN News level graphics with incredible efficiency that you could run on a high-end home computer. And they released it as the Future Crew. And their work style changed my life and built everything I'm going to talk about later in this talk. My perception of how group work should be, my perception of what projects are worth doing, my perception of what excellence in engineering could be is all indirectly thanks to the Future Crew, these 9 teenagers in Finland who are now adults. So that will explain any time I talk about engineering or group work. I'm definitely not talking about some framework where there's timed meetings or defined roles. I'm trying to maximize the amount of time that people are doing something they're really excited about, and they're trying to do it at a best in the world level because that's fun. And yeah, sometimes they want to stay up all night to do it, but no one's yelling at them to do it in the morning or when they do sleep. And they can sleep at any time and they can eat at any time. And it's like a hackathon, but some people have made this a fulfilling lifestyle with kids and other commitments and usually other jobs that's lasted decades or even their entire life. So this doesn't have to be a recipe for burnout. It doesn't have to be unfun. And it's something you can do with your friends because you want to try to achieve something best in the world. And that really matches every time I've seen breakthrough engineering. And it doesn't seem to matter if we're using post-it notes or not. And it doesn't seem to matter if we have any defined roles. It actually seems to be a lot more about individuals and interactions than any processes or tools. And it's definitely not frameworks. now I started doing the same thing in hardware. I started building cars this way in 2006. And it was taken exactly from what I thought was exciting about the demo scene. Oh, and I missed saying something important. This also created my love of electronic dance music. And I still can't find electronic dance music that hits me quite the way these kids in Finland did. Now, a little bit later, 6 years later, yeah, about 6 years later, Darude Sandstorm came out. I don't know how many of you even know Darude Sandstorm, but that's also from Finland, and it really fits. Like it, something makes sense about all that to me. Now that I went back in time, let's go to let's connect this to cars and why that might even matter. At the race in Fuji, the largest electric vehicle Grand Prix in the world, tours across Japan, interestingly. And at Fuji Speedway, the F1 track and Super GT track, Toyota has a museum and it's attached to a beautiful, fashionable hotel. It's a date location with champagne dinners and it's a very gorgeous hotel, the Fuji Speedway Hotel, facilitated by Toyota. And the first three floors of that hotel, at least the first two floors, is a motorsports museum curated by Toyota. And sorry, the text at the top, I took that picture from inside their motorsports museum. It's shining back at us. The background's shining back. It might not be so easy to read, but I've paraphrased it at the bottom in text that I typed. The first car races were to see, can a car be as fast as a horse? People are comfortable with horses. They understand horses. These new things called cars, are they any good? So let's compare them to a horse. And they had this muddy field, and a horse went around it, a fairly fast racing horse went around it, and then one of these cars. And the horse won. So these people then took their car back to their garages to say, what should we change to try to make it at least as quick as a horse? And they kept trying and kept trying and kept trying. And eventually they could go around this muddy field once faster than the horse. And the next criticism to try to address with the public evidence of racing, so these races were very public, crowds of people, was, well, can you do it more than one lap around? Can these cars actually last? Do they have any endurance? Can they go for 45 minutes? And the engineers kept working and kept working until finally they could. And then, well, can they do it on a cold day? Because of course they couldn't. And the engineers worked and worked and worked until they could do it on a cold day or even in the rain. And eventually that created what's called rally racing, where people would drive these new cars, these new concepts called automobiles, from one town to another over a mountain, maybe a snowy mountain, to show, can you actually use these things for transportation in inclement weather? And can they be quick? And these were all heavily spectated events. They were all challenging the engineering. Now, some things happened. Some racing has diverged so much that the cars are not even allowed to be driven on the street, and they don't have any usable luggage capacity and only hold one adult. Now, those cars, I think, look cool. I get it. They're fun to watch, but they have no rapid feedback loop to show that an automobile is evolving as a transportation method. Now, there's another type of racing. It goes by different names, but many people call it GT racing. And that's the Italian words Gran Turismo, which just means big tour, big travel. So it actually doesn't mean anything directly, but many people will use that word for GT racing. And what GT racing is, usually, people use these words in different ways. Usually, it's cars that you could actually drive to school. You could drive to work. They hold 4 or 5 people, sometimes even more. Um, they meet road legal requirements, or at least they were based at one time on cars that met road legal requirements. They have luggage space. And the idea of GT racing is if you prove something in GT racing, it might actually prove something in real world usable transportation. Now, in gasoline cars have been largely the same for about 40 years now. The pace of innovation has gotten really slow. But in electric vehicles, you truly are seeing significantly different evolutions, sometimes faster than once a week. You're at least seeing minor adjustments every day, from BYD's products, definitely Tesla's products, even some of the other American EVs have tweaks, in some cases as fast as once a year, which is unheard of compared to the traditional gasoline engineering pace in cars. And the current limit for the EVs cars when it comes to what they want to prove publicly is how long the batteries can last when they're hot. So remember the first automobiles, it was, can they go as fast as a horse? Is a car as good as a horse? Well, no. Okay, well, how would we show it is? Can it be as fast as a horse? Eventually it could. Can it go for an hour? And as long as the horse is not even tired yet. Yes, okay, now they can finally drive longer than a normal horse would be able to be ridden at that pace. They have more endurance than a horse. Can they go over a mountain? A horse can go over a mountain. A horse can go in the snow. And piece by piece, the cars prove themselves. Well, for EVs, the limit now is the batteries get hot. And when you're racing these cars on Twin Ring Motegi, on Sotogawara Raceway, on Fuji Speedway, the the batteries can only hold the heat. They can only push the heat out of the batteries for about 30 minutes. That's currently the limit. And the most popular races, the most people attend, are 2, 3, 5, or even 7 hours long. And some very famous races like the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the 24 Hours of Nürburgring are, of course, even longer than that. EVs can't do it yet. They can't. They have the highest safety scores. They have the most rapid acceleration. They have the highest performance per dollar or highest performance per euro. The EVs own many of the overall fastest lap times on race tracks around the world. But what they can't do yet is race for more than 30 minutes. So what all the EV makers have done is put real-time data feedback in the EVs that are racing for their engineers to try to understand how heat is propagating in the battery packs and what allows them to stay cooler longer and what allows the batteries to keep generating electricity safely even as they're getting hot. And the engineers truly work around the clock, 24-hour cycles, editing the software of how electricity is channeled through the packs and reprogramming the robots of how the packs are assembled and what chemistries are used and how the metal filaments are rolled at different parts of the battery packs. Only Japan has a national level EV GT racing series. Remember, GT is the word that's often used to mean like a car that's on the road. It doesn't always mean that, but if a car looks like a car that you drive on the road, it's often called GT racing. And for whatever reason, only Japan has a national level EV GT racing series. That series, as a result, then attracts drivers, race teams, and manufacturers from every part of the world. And it's popular. The cars that I own, that I race, are optional content in Gran Turismo 7 and Assetto Corsa, two of the most popular racing titles. So it's not even the people that come to Japan to see the races. They're active in sim racing and in mainstream video games. And that is advertising that a lot of companies would pay tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to get, and we're getting it for free because the engineering bar is so high to play at this level. Your engineering needs to be so good that it's a rare territory, and we get to participate. And now, very lucky for me, EVs hold all of the top safety scores globally. And what I'd like to share here, if any of you don't like racing, one of the reasons you might not like it is because there's risk. Oh, yeah, there is. But of all the racing types, EV racing can be the safest racing because EVs hold all of the top safety scores globally. Here at the bottom, this is a relatively new test. It was introduced last year in China. It's called the drill test. What happens is the back of a loaded semi truck has a car drive through where just the driver's heart, right where the driver's heart would be, connects with the back of the truck at high speed. And this test is completely unsurvivable. Only one car has ever been tested that's passed, and it's an EV. It's absurdly difficult to pass a test like this. But I want to say, even in this test, there is one car that passes it, and it's an EV. So when we're driving these cars, here's me where I spun out at Scuba Racetrack and I put my car right into the wall. And I was completely fine. I never worried about my safety, even in this over 1,000 horsepower car, smashing into the wall. This car, well, here it's broken, but this holds the lap record, the overall lap record for EVs at Scuba Circuit. So I'm in one of the quickest cars in the world, on one of the quickest racetracks in the world, and I smash right into the barrier. And I wasn't at all worried about my personal physical safety. And yes, there's a small chance for injury. I'm not saying you're invincible. I'm saying the chance of injury is so low, you can really be focused on the driving, on the engineering, on the feedback being sent to the engineers, and much less worried about your physical health. And I think that's phenomenal. And some of these cars are as cheap as $30,000 US before we equip them for racing. So this level of safety, higher than any other type of motorsport, is incredibly affordable. Manufacturers come from all over the world to test their newest EVs and to develop their newest EVs in JEVRA, the All Japan Electric Vehicle Racing Association EVGT. Here is an entrant that joined last year, 2024, the Hyundai i5N. And Hyundai, when they came, they brought 4 race-prepared cars. When factories join, they often join with many millions of dollars at once, and they usually enter 4 cars with a mix of professional drivers and hobbyist drivers to get feedback that's representative of a driver who truly trains every day for driving and people who are passionate about driving but not at that level. And in their debut race, sorry, this probably just looks like a bunch of numbers to everybody, so I'll interpret the point I'd like to make. In their very first race, Hyundai arriving, they won first place. Their car came out crushingly fast, race prepared, factory prepared, enormous motorsports budget. Still, you don't typically enter a car, and my engineering respect for Hyundai suddenly jumped up. They also got third place and fifth place. Um, we won our class that race, but we didn't win that race. Now, I was shocked having worked in Tesla and then looking at these cars, and the engineers and the drivers at these races are very friendly. You might have seen the movie Gran Turismo, or you might have seen the movie Le Mans. Sometimes they show drivers and teams as sabotaging each other, lying to each other, trying to trick each other. That almost never happens. It's incredibly friendly. And in fact, the parent companies like Hyundai try to make people not talk as much. They try to not have as much information shared because when you're at the track together, it's very natural. You feel like you're going to war against the race, not against each other. So it's very natural to feel camaraderie and to talk very honestly with each other, even about things that in another context, in another setting, you might think are too sensitive. So I was looking at these cars and talking to the engineers and thinking, why are they quick? The level of engineering does not seem to be very good. Is now my very rough, my bad opinion here. Why are these Hyundais performing at the top? They don't seem to be engineered very well, is my bad opinion. Now, interestingly, the next race, all those same cars showed up. One of them couldn't even start, and none of them came even close to winning. And what I think happened is the engineering was so bad that the cars don't actually automatically slow down and protect themselves when the battery packs get hot. I think. I don't know this to be true, but this is my observation from being on the track with these cars and seeing how they performed at the next race. And that would match what I think I observed. The cars were fast because they basically were damaging their batteries when any good engineered product was already automatically reducing its speed to reduce heat buildup in the battery pack. And these cars were so badly engineered, they didn't have that thermal protection, I believe. And the packs were permanently damaged. So they did get one quick race, and the cars were all essentially junk afterwards. A good analogy would be if you ever drove a remote control car with AA batteries inside, a bunch of store-bought batteries, and you use alkaline disposable batteries. Your car will be a little bit faster and it will last a few minutes longer than if you put rechargeable batteries in it. But the rechargeable batteries you can recharge. They don't have quite as much power for the same size and weight, but you can use them, I mean, not forever, but many, 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 many times. The Hyundais were so badly engineered, they were basically like buying new batteries from the 7-Eleven every time you want to go drive your RC car around the parking lot. Um, and what I also wonder is what the safety level might be, because if that's true, then without that level of thermal protection, there might be risks for thermal runaway that you wouldn't have in any other modern safe EV. Then Xiaomi, the cell phone maker, posted an incredibly quick lap time around the most famous racetrack in the world in Germany, the Nürburgring. So I was not there live when this happened, although I have raced at the Nürburgring many times. But they posted this on the internet, on YouTube and on other sites with a ridiculously fast speed. And they said in the prototype category, our Xiaomi SU7 Ultra prototype has set the world record for a four-door car on the Nürburgring. And I was completely impressed. I knew EVs could be quick, but this was shockingly fast, bizarrely fast. And then Xiaomi brought one, a green one, to Jevra to race. And it finished eighth place behind a Honda, an electric Honda with less than 200 horsepower. And I said, wait a minute, what is going on? What is going on? When you compare the press publication to how these cars actually, well, this car, the green one, actually performed on the track, it's laughably, embarrassingly different. What's going on? And I started even trying to visually compare. Here's the production SU7 Ultra, the one I actually raced against, the green one. Let's look at the side area here and the front area here, for example, and compare it to what they brought to the Nürburgring. One, you can see they've put some aerodynamic aids and they've cut out the side, but I'm an engineer and I've built race cars. You actually don't get that much speed by changing the aerodynamic shape, no matter how much advertising happens about it. What you might notice is this is not even the same car. This cutout shows that very likely the chassis, the frame underneath here, like look at how far back, well, it's hard to see, but how far back this goes. This is all hollow for air to go in here. And that means it's actually hollow behind these wheels too. And instead they have the only hard part of the car in front is probably this triangle here. It's not even the same car. They made, again, I'm likely these cars have batteries that you can never recharge, or they're junk after one lap attempt. They're not using the body or the interior frame or the suspension or the wheels or the tires. There is likely nothing in common between these cars. So this is a drive and throwaway race car, and that is incredibly fast, but putting the same name on it as the production car is a marketing lie. And the point I want to make here is companies lie very aggressively to try to say they have good engineering. And when you actually race in electric vehicles, and it's not like racing is some perfect or beautiful scientific exercise, but it gives you another perspective to understand what actually is the level of engineering of the cars they actually sell. Because Jevra is a GT series. It's cars that you actually have to sell. You're not even allowed to change the seats, except the driver's seat you can change, but then you have to weigh them the same. So these cars are truly the same as you'd buy, and you get to see how junk most of the engineering actually is. And we won against the Xiaomi amazing record setter, which couldn't beat the 200 horsepower Honda. There's us, first place. This is uh, at Scuba Circuit, and here's me celebrating with our driver. I think some of you know me already from past SFBABAM events. I'm Joe Justice. I was really lucky I got to work with Bill Gates directly. I was a developer at Microsoft, and then I worked as an Agilist at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on a team with Bill. And then I consulted at Amazon under Jeff Bezos. And I was completely inspired by the future crew out of Finland and other things, but I think that story connects here pretty well. And I founded wikispeed in 2006, making cars. And I now own the largest EV racing series, racing team, I think, on Earth. And what I'd like everybody to know um, is I think Bill Gates is naturally very good at splitting businesses into pieces that aren't dependent, into less dependent pieces. And this is the core principle for multi-threading software, parallel execution software. Well, Bill does this, I think, with all business. Um, there's a very good reason that Microsoft Office is run as the Word team, the Excel team, the OneNote team, um, the Excel team, the PowerPoint team, and they're completely independent from each other. They're like their own companies, and they do internal releases at any time. They're not on some train. They're not doing PSIs. They release at any time, faster the better, at least internally. And then packaging those things together into any one thing, Office 365 or Microsoft Office or Teams, that's a marketing activity. And marketing is run like it's its own company, the way Bill had set it up. And it's still run this way, the best of my knowledge. And what that does is it reduces the need for any kind of scaling. You just don't have it, at least on a good day. And this is with hundreds of thousands of developers. That little town, South Bend, Indiana, I showed you on the map where I came from, the population of that whole town where I was born is less than the number of developers that were working in Microsoft when I was an employee there. Like on that campus, on the Redmond campus, the town of Redmond, the Microsoft campus on Redmond was a larger town than the town I was born in, including the university and everything, universities. Then when I worked in Amazon, it was exactly the same, but the teams were smaller. By the time I worked in Amazon in 2016, Bezos had already implemented the two pizza rule. Now, this hadn't created the revolution that was Amazon Web Services yet, but it very naturally became Amazon Web Services because Bezos also continually resplit the company, broke up groups. With my observation, what I believe happened when I was there, broke up groups until they were two pizza size, which practically meant three, four, or five people. And those people each had their own product end to end. They did their own program management, their own project management, their own coding, their own testing, their own deploy. And that became Amazon Web Services. A web service is basically a group of three, four, or five humans operating independently. So you don't need any scaling. You don't need hardly any meetings. Um, when I read biographies or listen to biographies of Bezos and Gates and Musk, they all talk about meetings and they talk about hierarchy and they talk about chain of command. I don't know where people get this junk. I don't know how many of you have worked in different parts of Microsoft or Amazon or a Musk company, and I don't know when and in which era. But what I experienced was almost no meetings. The meetings were basically to keep people away from the developers or to break up teams that got too big. And these biographies seem to want to talk about the part of work that's talking and not the part of work that's working, which is a really small part of the work when we look at minutes worked or seconds worked. When I went to work in Tesla, and if you've been following SFBABAM or Agile Tales, you know all about what I was able to brain dump from it. I didn't experience meetings, and I just finished the um, Walter Isaacson audiobook on Elon Musk, and all it talks about is meetings, and it almost doesn't mention engineering at all. And I don't know how these people perceive this, where they how they contrive that when they sit with people. I guess every time they see a working session or every time they see group work, they translate it as meeting. Maybe that's what it is. Now, Elon also had really small groups, 3, 4, 5 people. But what I think I observed is it was more and more usefully assisted by AI than I've still ever seen. And this was 5 years ago now, and I've still not seen this useful level of AI assistance anywhere else yet. Maybe it's this year. Maybe. I mean, AI is blown up, and I think people are really figuring out how to use it. But I think most people are working one-on-one with AI, or they're replacing humans with AI. I think the group work assisted by AI is still really not understood. I started Wikispeed in 2006 and I didn't have AI assist, but we worked in groups of 3, 4, 5 humans mostly, and we would cut off modules of the car. We'd split off modules of the car so that people could work alone in 3, 4, 5. And this is one of our first cars. We built this one. I think this is the one we built in Caesar's Palace live in like 17 hours, including the engineering. We're laying up carbon fiber. We're cutting aluminum in a conference room in Caesar's Palace. There's time lapses of it. This is one of the 4 world records we set, is how quickly can you design, build, and then later we tested and got road legal approval and license plates and sold the car. And the total cycle was less than 7 days. So that's one of the 4 world records we set. Um, what made it so quick is we were running like the future crew, like those 9 Finnish kids. And I didn't play that much of the video, but you actually don't see all 9 of them in one room at once. It's usually 3, 4, or 5 of them in one room at once. And I think that 2 pizza rule number matters. I think so. And that's about the size I observed almost every time at Tesla and when I visited SpaceX as well. And the reason these teams can do something useful when they're that small is there are many ways to split hardware or software. There are few ways that produce many pieces that can be built and tested in any order or at the same time. This is what I try to call modular architecture. I'm basically just trying to do what software developers have been doing since C++ or even Smalltalk. Smalltalk is not a very efficient and compiled language compared to C++ or assembly, so I actually wouldn't recommend it when you're actually doing something production. The entire team works with, I use the old word product owner. I never had an actual product owner, but it's the person who's paying you to build something. So someone has funds, Elon, or when it's my company, me, where they're deciding what to build because they're the one paying people to do work. I could use the Scrum word and say product owner. But anyway, whoever's paying us, they work together to keep recutting the product physically until it's a piece that 3, 4, 5 people says we think we can get it tested and done hopefully in a day. So you have a quick feedback loop. So you keep cutting the car and cutting the car and cutting the car. And some of you follow me on LinkedIn and you've seen the chief software officer at Mercedes-Benz thank me for working with Mercedes-Benz. And you've seen the executives at BMW thank me for working with BMW. And you've seen Volvo Cars thank me for working with them at their headquarters in Gothenburg. And you've seen some of the Chinese companies like Geely talk about me working with Jaguar Land Rover and consulting with Lotus and going to Shenzhen. And what none of those companies have been willing to do yet, and the reason I keep beating them at Jevra in Teslas is because they won't recut the cars. They won't split them differently until it's mob AI sized, 3, 4, 5 humans assisted by AI sized. They refuse to do it. They want to have the closures team that's responsible for any time two materials touch, like where a door closes. They want to have the gaskets team that's responsible for all gaskets anywhere in the product. They want to have the health and safety team that audits all teams as they're going for health and safety and makes teams start over for not filing the correct health and safety paperwork. Instead of running these pieces like their own little company, where you have the interior team that owns their own health and safety, that owns their own procurement, that owns their own software development. The seats, of course, have sensors. They have airbags, they have heating and cooling. They're connected to the battery packs. You want the front crush structure team that's responsible for the crash safety up until where the passenger's feet are, the driver and passenger's feet are. From there forward is owned by the pedal plate team, the front crush structure team. And they operate completely independently from everybody else, changing alloys, changing suppliers, changing software. Yes, they need clearly defined interfaces, but this is what makes the company quick. When you split a SpaceX rocket apart, and I published diagrams in some of my YouTubes and my videos on X, and you can see they're all modules, 3, 4, 5 people big. Every Tesla is built that way. Almost no company operates this way, but it's very natural when you think about software. Amazon does it in web services, and Amazon is globally highly successful. At a market cap level, they are globally unusually successful. Microsoft did this with Office and still does it with some other products. And in those areas, Microsoft is globally successful. LLM models are often trained now by the quick companies in groups of 3, 4, 5 AI professionals assisted by AI. And they do a piece of the LLM training that's that size. What we don't want are shared teams like project management, like functional safety, like software that's shared across different groups. And this is what Volkswagen got very wrong. And I was working with Volkswagen under DICE. They made the separate software group, separate software company, and they ran it just like a traditional company with program management, project management, product management. They used SAFe. So they were on at the quickest you can possibly go in SAFe is once a quarter, your quarterly PSIs. And they couldn't even hit quarterly releases because they had this large software only organization that was always dependent on hardware or dependent on data because they weren't full stack groups. They were they were teams of hundreds of people in many cases. And the Standish Group data is highly suspect, highly suspect. And when we look at the data collection, it doesn't stand up to even elementary um, uh, useful data gathering practices, statistical um, gathering practices. However, even a data set this junk points out the obvious. Large projects that take more than 3 months before release, even the junk data set says it's almost never on time. It's almost never on budget. They say 3% of the time on budget. And if you can just release every month or faster, every month, we're not even talking about once a day, like I'm talking about in hardware at Tesla. your success rate goes up to over half. Now, if you get it down to once a day, of course, your efficiency goes way up. And here's the useful takeaway, I believe, from what I think I've learned so far. It's the module size, the piece of the thing, the hardware or software, that determines how long it takes to test and deploy something. We need to keep splitting until 3, 4, or 5 people, assisted by AI, can design, build, test, and deploy their piece as done. So if that means it's just the headrest of the seat, then make that an independent company, the headrest of the seat company, and have that team be able to design, build, and test to the extent you need to test a headrest at least every 30 days and try to get it faster. And when they can design, build, test with their suppliers, at least the headrest, and have it road legal approved and in production in 30 days, then say, all right, can you do the side bolsters of the seat too? And eventually you want them to own the whole seat, like Tesla does. You have the seat team. And their AI is really good and they've been doing it a long time. So they actually design, build, test, get road legal approval, and sell new versions of the seat more than once a day. They target 12-hour cycles and they often hit it. But that's largely because they program their own AI, purpose-built AI. And here's what these teams actually look like. These pictures are old from when I was working in Tesla. So I hope you've seen them before. But when these people are working, it actually looks like those Finnish teenagers working. It looks like the future crew. And that's what I experienced. That's what I thought I observed. It's really fun. Most people are there because they want to be there. They could get more money working somewhere else. Tesla pays very low. Um, like the future crew, the future crew wasn't even getting paid. They were doing it because they loved it and they wanted to try to do something legitimately best in the world and hopefully something new. And that's the overriding feeling that I think I experienced. And the reason they're able to get that success is because the modular size. So these teams directly request to split and resplit the modules. And as the teams get bigger, they request, may I absorb neighboring modules? That's where you get something like the gigacast, where it absorbs 70 parts around it. They collapse into a team that one mob AI can work on. And now, I hope I can provide something useful here. A lot of Agile coaches all around the world are contacting me saying they don't have clients. And a lot of Agile coaches all around the world are saying that they were working on large frameworks like Scaled Agile Framework, and it's been kicked out of the entire company and they've gone back to normal waterfall. So hundreds of Agile coaches have been laid off at once. Whereas I had either my best or second best financial year last year ever. Um, and it keeps getting better. And it's because of Mob AI. So this is what I'd like to just, I hope, clearly explain to any Agilist, especially if an Agilist is struggling for work or worries you might be struggling for work later. This seems to be well understood and paying well in the global market all around the world right now. And I license it out. Some people just copy it, but I have a licensing agreement to the training materials. It's a game that tries to replicate what I think I experienced in Tesla. And it tries to make how those Finnish teenagers look like, joyfully coding in assembly and making their own songs and graphics. It works like this. It's based on mob development or software teaming, the way Woody Zool defines it. You have 3, 4, or 5 humans. So this is not identical to how Woody describes it, but it's inspired by Woody. There's 3, 4, or 5 humans. And the way I will introduce it is one of them is the driver. And at least in the beginning, at least for the first 100 hours of work, they're the only person doing the work. They're the only person typing. Or if we're welding, they're the only person welding, hardware or software. They're the only person doing chip design, whatever it is we're doing. Then there's one navigator in the beginning. And this person is telling the driver exactly what to do. If we're writing code, they're saying, type this exactly. After a few hours, they might start giving higher level guidance. And this, if you watch the whole Future Crew clip, this is actually very similar to what they're doing. And they take turns. Everyone plays the driver. And in the way I propose this game, everyone has to play the driver. Now, how long each person is driver in a turn, that depends on the work we're doing. We want to make sure each driver gets a successful feeling before they hand off to the next driver. But it's not like, okay, you're successful, rotate. It's put on a timer the way I will propose this game. I think that increases psychological safety dramatically. So everyone's job is to help the driver experience success before the timer goes off. And the length of the timer depends on the type of work we're doing. If we're doing TIG welding, it might be 3 minutes, maybe, depending on the experience level of the team. If we're writing software, depending on what we're writing, it could be as long as 15 minutes. But the timer is on a fixed duration until everyone has had a turn. Everyone plays driver, everyone plays navigator, but there's only one driver and only one navigator. The driver is focused on the tool. They're thinking about the specific code syntax, or is the gas mixture correct, or how they're using the torch or the robotic controls for the welder. The navigator is keeping in mind what we're actually trying to accomplish, the business value, what's important from a security perspective, what's important from an architecture perspective, a safety perspective. Will this pass safety testing? That's in the navigator's mind. The other one, two, or three people are all programming AI. And they're doing it in a very simple way. If you've done Minecraft and Minecraft commands, where you turn on survival mode or adventure mode or creative mode with a command line prompt, that's the level of code I'm talking about here, at least in the beginning. It's very, very simple. If you can type an email, you can do this level of code. What the mob AI is doing is they're tagging data about what the driver is doing and only about what the driver is doing that helps train our own AI. And the reason you have one, two, or three people doing that, even when there's only one driver, is because it takes longer to tag useful data about what the driver is doing in a way that will actually improve your own AI. And you have to do this if your company is not going to be in a financial race to the bottom, period. We're already seeing that when you ask for a logo to be generated, if you don't just click the generate button yourself, or if you ask for software to be written, you look for companies that have a lower price bid and a higher quality record. And those are currently your contractors that use AI well. Contractors that use AI well are responding to proposal with less expensive and higher quality services. Now, if you only use ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, you can't get better than ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot. And every time you use it, you're making ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot better, not your own asset. Even if you have an independent licensed piece of ChatGPT, which most of my clients do, they have their own branded instance of ChatGPT that they pay for. They still don't own the AI inside it. When they use that AI, ChatGPT gets better. Nothing they own gets better. So you actually have to set up your own LLM. It actually has to be your own thing that you own. Whether you use Llama 2 or you write your own or you run Grok 1, whatever you do, it has to be your own software and ideally on your own physical rack. That means you can sell it. Now you have an asset. Yes, your racks depreciate. That's true. Yes, the cost goes down, but you own it. In all the other cases, it's like paying to do an expensive remodel in an apartment building you're renting. That's what it means to use ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini. Only companies that do the extra work to start training their own AI can become high price, high skill providers. And we're seeing this already. So here's the level of code you'd need to do. When you're the Mob AI role, you can do advanced, awesome code, but in the minimum is very low bar. You write a text file with three things. You watch what the driver is doing, and you write question. What's a question that I've asked our AI that helped the driver? Context, what was the driver working on when I asked that question? And response, what was the useful answer I got from the AI that actually helped the driver? Now, when humans give expert advice, you also type this in if and only if it seemed to have actually helped the driver. So the three mob AIs are largely silent. One, two, or three mob AIs are largely silent. They're watching whoever's navigator and driver and listening. And they're writing 3 sentence long text files. What's the thing that actually helped the driver? What was the driver working on? And um, what was the specific text that you think would actually, sorry, what was the struggle the driver was having? What was the problem the driver was striving to solve? That's the question. Context, what was the driver working on? And response, what was the suggestion or what did the driver do that was actually helpful? Most companies don't do this. Most companies pay a data gathering firm to try to create data, which will never make them best in the world at the engineering they do. It will never even differentiate them. Whereas if your data set is only what actually helps your driver, and if the driver is actually only working what actually is a valuable product for your company, that's how you create an AI that can help you make a more comfortable seat that lasts longer in a car. That's how you create an AI that can help you generate a more efficient electrical motor than has ever been designed before. This is how you repeatedly get best in the world engineering. The very short summary is what I'll call mob AI. And it's three, four, or five humans assisted by your own AI. And this game and running workshops to show people how to play this game on their actual work is the majority of my business now, all around the world. I do it almost exclusively remote, but I occasionally do it in person, largely because I like to travel. Um, and what makes this easier is modular architecture. Tip, you can use any AI. You can use ChatGPT, you can use Gemini, you can use Copilot, but when you get a good answer, write it in a text file so you can feed it into your Llama, you can feed it into your Grok 1, you can feed it into whatever you own. My other company, wikispeed, sells mob AI ready to train on a workstation. It's Grok 1 instances on two NVIDIA H100As. And it costs about as much as a budget developer's salary for a year. That's actually everything I wanted to talk about today. Um, I hope Mob AI is useful to the Agilists here, whether you call it Mob AI or not, whether you license the content that I'm playing with or not, whatever you do. I hope group work assisted by AI can replace your frameworks, can replace your meetings, can replace your coaching, can replace even the way you run retrospectives, because I don't think you actually need any of that anymore, as controversial as that is to say. Um, Elon thinks so too. There are no agile coaches in any Musk company, and there's no frameworks, and there's no meetings, no agile meetings anyway. There's working sessions. And I hope this connects back to something fun and maybe intrinsically motivating. And that's the Future Crew's second reality. I'm actually going to put those links right now into the chat so you can watch all 16 minutes of Second Reality. I highly recommend it. And then you can see the YouTube of those kids crushing it. Um, okay, it is going directly into the chat now, but it's at the timestamp I left the video. So wait, where? Yeah, here's chat. So you might have to skip back to the beginning. There's Second Reality, and here's the home video of these kids crushing it, which I think is what world-class engineering always looks like every time. Um, and then I hope modular architecture and then mob AI give you everything you would need to accomplish that if you wanted to, if that's a goal you have. Um, and for those of you with deep agile skill sets, I think those skills are still the skills the world needs, because how else are you going to convince people to introduce modular architecture? How else are you going to sell that vision and then implement it and get people on board? And then how are you going to transition companies from hierarchical, meeting-driven organizations towards mob AI, three, four, five humans assisted by AI working on a module, working on a service? I think you'd need all those agile skills. Um, but then the goal is to just be doing the engineering. Like there's no one in the future crew that's project manager, right? They're all just engineers. And I think that's what it always looks like. Okay, I got excited and went way over. Please use any remaining time for anything you like. Please go ahead.
It's really interesting, Joe. Thanks.
Anyone have any questions? Because I don't see anything in Mentimeter at all.
There's a bunch of stuff in the chat, but yeah, my phone went to sleep, so I don't see Mentimeter right now myself.
There's
Well, it sounds like it's another. I like the parallel that you drew. It's a cultural shift. Getting to that, moving away from, like you said, hierarchical to, back to that utility, that usefulness of having that autonomous teams. That's where I'm really seeing the parallel there, and it's resonating with me. If you've ever worked on a team like that, you know how awesome it is.
all right, Maru, you have your hands up?
Um, yeah, Joe, the stuff in the chat is just me making attempts at humor. And about my only question to you is how much percentage of your time in a year does your racing team work take from you, and how long is the season? Just because I don't know how you
Yeah.
manage the cognitive load.
So if I was doing more development, there's really no limit to the amount of time that's useful to it. So you can really spend as much time on racing because there's a tremendous return on investment from engineering and innovation. However, I just well, how to say this the right way. The the mostly Teslas. My team is not all Teslas, but the Teslas that I'm running are so far advanced from the rest of the field that unfortunately I spend essentially zero time on it. So there's 7 races in 2025. Um, and the day before each race, I check the cars with anyone else who's going to be um, doing mechanics activities or racing. We check the cars over, we do maintenance the day before. And then we drive the cars to the tracks. They're all in a big loop around Tokyo. They're in what's called the Kanto region. So it doesn't take so many hours to get there, maybe 3 hours, 1, 2, or 3 hours to get to the track. And then we have dinner. And then we campaign at the track all day. There's the sessions are only 30 minutes long, as mentioned, battery pack limited, but we have more than one session in a day. And then we go to dinner that night and we park the cars until the next race, and that is it. So basically 2 days, 7 times a year is what my commitment is planned to be to absolutely win every class in 2025. And that's pretty similar to what we did last year because we happened to choose cars that already just so evolved from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, I get it. So you're not allowed to work on the technology for the cars outside of the race season.
Oh, no, you are. And most of the other teams are. I'm just saying they're that far behind.
Okay,
Um, So,
okay, got
so
it.
when I wasn't with such a competitive car already, um, like with wikispeed, there was a period of time in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, where I was doing more than 100 hours every week of my own time. Um, and still, the cars would have benefited from more time. But, that was simply as much time as I had energy and fitness to put out was just over 100 hours in a week consistently for years. It was intense, but I did love it. So the cars totally benefit from a lot of time, and I have had to do that before when I was making my own cars end to end. But right now, the Teslas, at least on a track setting, just dominate. You don't need to put that time in.
Thanks. Thanks, Joe.
All right, then Tom asked if there are any case studies of your recent experience.
Oh, oh, I did publish a white paper with Majo uh, University in Japan and two Japanese researchers on how AI can be used, is used in the Musk companies, from what I believe, not to replace human work, but to um, increase human autonomy. And that's not exactly the same as a case study. It's not case study format, but it is an academic white paper format. And that's largely thanks to Professor Sadoui um, doing the research and formatting and mentoring me as a junior author to make that paper excellent. And Senkai-san did a tremendous amount of the work. So that was published in 2024. And they have an ambition to publish with me another paper in 2025. The bottleneck really seems to be so few companies are actually doing this. As I mentioned, I'm working with many of the world's top automotive companies and aerospace too. I didn't talk about aerospace much this session, but aerospace as well. But most of them are refusing to resplit their architecture. So they have these huge pieces, and then they have teams that aren't aligned with the piece. They have teams aligned based on skill. So I don't get any useful data from most of my clients. So I don't have fresh data. Still, most of the data I have is from my race team, um, which I mentioned I don't even have to do much engineering right now. And then from back in 2020, when I was in Tesla, which I did publish through Agile Tales, is how I do that case study. But frankly, I just don't see other companies actually willing to operate this way. So I don't have the data to make a case study. Thanks so much for asking about it, Tom.
Oh, Tom actually have a follow-up. Ask, do you plan to publish case studies of your current mob stuff experience?
That I should, or somebody should. I'd co-author with them and supply data. I'd like someone with rigorous statistical data gathering experience, or at least willingness to figure out what rigorous statistically relevant data gathering should be and experiment design to create the thing we would do with Mob AI. And then I guess we would have the same group of people do the same or something similar without Mob I guess. I'd really like to do that. I do these workshops all the time, so there's plenty of opportunity to grab that data. But I would need someone to propose the experiment design, a rigorous, ethical, statistically useful experiment design. And then I would need to collaborate with them to make it fit the Mob AI workshop format. And then I would simply run every workshop that quarter or even that year with that format and just keep gathering data. I would love to do that, but I would need someone with more knowledge of experiment design and data gathering to coach me and I guess co-author. But I would love that. I think that would help a lot of people. I do think Mob AI is the short version, is one name for the short version of what is the answer. Um, Basically, I worry without Mob AI, AI just replaces human work and we end up getting bad products and unemployed people. And I think the right answer for human-centered design is to still have humans in the loop. And I think the way to make that fun and profitable is what I'll call Mob AI. But anyway, something following that or a similar format. So demonstrating its effectiveness and making that more popular, I actually think is my play to make humanity still valuable in the age of AI. So I think it's that big. I think it's truly existential level. So I would like that to happen. I'd like case studies to be published or critical, correct, useful information to be gathered about it.
And just a follow-up comment with Thomas, he said, in the meantime, before controls statistical studies, simple case studies will be interesting, even if they fail. So, all right. So I see two questions from Maru, but before we do that, since we're actually running out of time, we first want to thank Joe for such an insightful session. It sure gives us quite a bit of food for thought. But before we end, we would like to get some quick feedback. And after the feedback, if you guys want to stay behind, if Joe have another 5 minutes, then would love to get to the remaining questions that we have. So Maru has two, and I believe the Glenn has his hands up. So let's address that after we get the feedback. So Pete, if you can share the screen. So that's actually we're using Mentimeter, and here's the link. All right. So what were you hoping for when you joined the session? Agile manufacturing, new information, an interesting story, insight, innovative ideas. Staying awake because it's 4 a.m. Wow, bravo. My goodness. Amazing. Ideas, inspiration, Tesla insight. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's. Ooh. All right. Let's move on to the next one. On the scale of 1 to 5, to what degree did this session meet your expectations, and how useful was this meetup? Okay, 4.6 and 4.8. All right, out of 5. Okay, final, please. What is the one takeaway that you're walking away with? Mob AI. AI at the team level. Future is bright. Must rethink many things with Mob AI. Make your LLM your own to serve your native teams. Build your own LLM. Equip smaller teams to build with their own AI. Electric car racing might be interesting. Japan is really an awesome place for racing with cool people. All right. Well, thank you so very much, everyone, for attending. And thank you again, Joe, a new design method, build your own LLM. All right. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. And thank you again, Joe. Um, we are officially done. But if you want to stay behind for another 5 minutes, then let's get to Maru's question. And also, Glenn has his hands up. But whoever needs to go, you are welcome to go. And I hope to see you all next month. All right. So, Maru's question: how would you recommend work and supply chains? Uh, how would you recommend work and supply chains are re-engineered at a massive operation like Boeing? And do you think the age of problem solvers and engineers is cycling back and we will move away from massive management structures?
Awesome point. And I'm really passionate about Boeing. I used to do a car build with wikispeed. So before joining Tesla, before 2020, every Thursday night in a tiny factory, I guess I could call it a factory, is like a huge garage or a tiny factory. We would design, build, test, and deploy a car every Thursday in Seattle, Washington, actually Linwood, Washington, closer to Mukilteo, where Boeing has their airport. And for a few years, Boeing had a policy where every new hired executive would come to my garage, my tiny factory, on a Thursday, and they would build a car with me and whoever showed up that night. So I got to meet over a period of years all different types of Boeing executives that would work in Chicago or work anywhere, but they would have to fly in. It was part of their onboarding to go to the wikispeed shop. And we would design, build, test, and deploy a car that night. So they knew it could be done, and it was really exciting. But unfortunately, it didn't change the approved policies or get involved in renegotiating the union agreements that make Boeing what Boeing is. But I really respect the company, and I have a lot of hands I've shaken with people that have worked in senior positions at Boeing. And I've been invited into the company as a result to do many different things. I do think, I love the way you wrote you said your question. I do think this is the future for companies like Boeing. And I think if we look back in time, I did not work for Howard Hughes. That's before I was born. But I hear stories from some people who did, and I've read stories from people who were, and it actually sounds a lot like this. And when I look at World War II, boat development and aircraft development, bomber development and fighter development, tank development, many times structural changes and supply chain changes were being made in less than a week, many times. And this is very well documented. The Spitfires in England had supply chain changes and hardware changes in batches of less than a week for most of World War II. And this type of working is definitely not unheard of. And they didn't have great AI then. So it's even easier now. Like it's way easier now. And you don't have threat of death. Like we don't have to even have a war. Like it's a way better situation now. So I think it sure could. But the problem is there's so much money to be made by complaining to the government that there's not as much interest or appetite for most of the large companies like Airbus or Boeing to make any structural changes. Cost plus is still very profitable. When you look at the awards for the United Launch Alliance or Airbus compared to SpaceX, SpaceX delivers thousands of times more, but they're given 10% of contracts or less. And 90% of the money goes to, in many cases, the United Launch Alliance, to Airbus, to Boeing, even though these companies in some cases never delivered. And because there's so much money coming in, it pays a lot to hire someone who's really handsome and smiles a lot and is very agreeable and very fun to talk to. An actor, basically. It pays a lot to hire an actor and have them come in and just keep asking for money. And that's what we call an MBA. And it's a disease and it's very popular. So if you look, basically any company that hires MBAs, they make a lot of money on essentially fraud. And it's so popular that you have to want to be part of the future crew. You have to want to be part of a Musk company and work way harder for less money. And that's just not as popular. So I don't think most of the large companies, even though they're my clients, are going to make significant changes until the money dries up. And I'm not sure if the money will ever dry up.
Thank you. And Maru has some follow-up comment. He said not only that, that was the first time in history women were involved in engineering and re-engineering of industry, machinery, weaponry, and maths because there was a shortage of men. That was a massive breakthrough.
whenever you take MBAs out and it becomes about cost efficient engineering, suddenly the gender gap starts to reduce, age diversity starts to grow, like the problems start to go away. It's really amazing when you actually focus on trying to make something best in the world in a fun way as quickly as possible.
Okay, Glenn, you have your hands up for a while.
Thanks, Manway. I'm kind of growing my question list here, Joe. I'll try. The first one is quick. What's your take on Chinese EV makers, particularly BYD? They seem to be doing some good stuff. Are they following sound engineering principles?
The level of engineering is what, how do I answer this honestly? Um, it seems to be excellent 1980s level engineering, like making an awesome Super Famicom, like an awesome Nintendo. Um, they're willing to design circuit boards. Like the primary advantage from my point of view of China is there's no part of the supply chain they're not willing to do themselves. Whereas in most of Europe and North and South America, people say, no, we're here to manage the supply chain. We buy silicon, we don't make silicon. We buy ball bearings, we don't make ball bearings. We buy injection molded plastics, we don't make them. Um, whereas in China, companies are willing to set up an injection molding plastics plant, no matter what they think their company actually is. They're willing to set up a ball bearings plant, no matter what they think their company actually is. The actual quality of engineering is pretty basic. I don't think it's bad. I think it's like really solid 1980s mindset engineering. Like most Chinese companies, last time I was in Shenzhen was a year ago. So this is old data. But a year ago, most of the companies were not even allowed to use AI. Government mandate. The government said, look, we don't have a controlled, locked variant of AI yet that's approved, so you don't get to use it. So these companies really were working like spreadsheets, calculators, slide rules, which works. Like, how many companies do you know introduced Dassault or a CAD suite and slowed down, right? Because they're struggling with their BLM system and trying to get their bomb in SAS, and it just crushes them. When I visit these facilities in China, people are willing to like have a piece of cardboard with the phone numbers written of the three people at the supplier that they would need to talk to if they need something this morning instead of this afternoon. And it's this willingness to get directly involved in it that seems to be completely awesome compared to what most of what I'd call the West is willing to do. And as a result, the engineering is great by comparison, but you don't get self-driving out of that. You don't get breakthrough next generation engineering out of that. You don't get phenomenal battery chemistry engineering out of that. What you get is a low cost, reliable electric equivalent of a 1980s gasoline car with an awesome infotainment system. Karaoke in the car, great colorful monitors. You get that. Um, but you don't get dramatically new superior metal alloys. You don't get innovation in the manufacturing process, like the idea of the gigacast. Those companies are following more and more and more behind. Now you can skew the data all different kinds of ways to try to tell a different story. And a lot of the media will want to do that for one reason or another. Like BYD was claimed to have just outsold Tesla in EVs for the first time ever at the end of 2024. Um, the Model Y, Tesla, is the best selling car in China. Like, depending on how you look at the data, the case for Tesla is so overwhelmingly positive. And the Model Y costs what, 3 times more than the bottom level BYD, which they sell the majority of. So if you include basically microcars, like golf carts and fleet sales of those, which are road legal in some cases in China, like electric rickshaws almost, if you include those and call that a car, then sure. But that's like adding up all the t-shirts Tesla sales and calling those cars too. And then adding that to the Model Y and Model S and Model X and Model 3 and Cybertruck numbers. So no, China is not winning in my impression. They're totally winning over most traditional Western engineering companies that refuse to do their own engineering. Yes, but that's nothing that some strong Midwestern company couldn't totally take back. Some Texas company, some California company couldn't totally take back. They just have to say we're not above this type of work anymore. It's okay for us to set up a ball bearing plant. That's all right. That's okay for us. We're not just MBAs.
Okay, so paraphrasing what you said, Tesla is crushing it, and they're basically going to take over the automotive industry. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, unless the government stops Tesla. But Elon made a huge risky bet and pulled it off, at least so far, of aligning with the government. So I think for the next 4 years, yes, Tesla is just going to continue to crush it beyond all belief. But what happens 4 years after that? It truly is at the government affected level, and just a few sets of tariffs and policies could completely break Tesla. And I think Elon knows that. And I think that's why Elon is so involved in statecraft right now. So I think you've got to view this on the level of like military strength, these huge global levels now, because that's how big the Musk companies, I think rightly are. So if the UK outlaws X and something like Tesla can be disrupted, but it's at the government level, not because of fault of engineering. But Elon gets that. And right now, Elon is currently effectively balancing even statecraft, which is insane.
That makes me a bit concerned, but that's a whole other topic.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
The big question I wanted to ask you was, do you see a transition strategy for a company to go from a traditional model to a mod AI model? I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and if you can find a sponsor who will get rewarded for increasing revenue and profit, staff and customer engagement, and they won't kill it, then it could go all the way.
I absolutely think so. And I think, luckily, because I've been part of the Agile community for decades, um, I've gotten to know a lot of people who are really skillful change agents and well known at being change agents. And I think people with that skill set, and I like to think I'm in that skill set sometimes as an Agilist or an Agile passionate person. I think what they're mostly able to do is set up pilots to get permission to run a pilot and say, these 90 people, can we have 9 years where they can work in a different way? And maybe it doesn't get to be 90 people for 9 years, but maybe it gets to be 9 people for 9 months. Whatever you can get. Maybe it's one person for a day, but whatever you can get, right? You can actually run Mob AI and you don't have to attend any other meetings and you actually have product control. No matter how small the product, like I said, maybe it's just the headrest of the seat, but they actually own that. They own its testing and certification, the supply chain, all of it. They actually own that. And depending on the size of the pilot, you might get an executive team that lets you have the whole company be the pilot. And of course, this stuff works. So I think it's simply permission and how big the permission is. But I think a lot of Agilists can get permission for a team at a time. Where it breaks down, I think most of the time, is most of us change agents, I'll say us, don't get permission to change the product architecture. So you might get a team, but you get the functional safety team, which is an important thing, but that's not going to let you run Mob AI and iterate the product in a day. You could do it in Amazon, but Amazon largely does. They're actually not that far off from what I'm saying. Or last time I was there, you can have a web service, right? It's its own entity. It's like it's its own company, it has its own revenue stream. You could do it in Boeing if you split this truss, this one part, this fuel tank, but they don't. They have a separate test company that's allowed to disrupt you. You're not allowed to deviate from set-based, phase-based design on a multi-year cadence with internal to Boeing legislated approvals. Now, that's not aerospace law. SpaceX also flies humans, and they don't do any of that junk. So that's Boeing law, not aviation law. But you'd need companies willing to, in many cases, even renegotiate their their contracts where they write in, we will agree to this policy. We will subsume in the contract these 10,000 pages of Boeing law. But it depends what the company's making. Like, say it's Cummins making diesel trucks. They could totally do this. They're well connected with their supply chain. They could absolutely do this. They could have a pilot that says, okay, the hood, the bonnet of the semi trucks, let's rev those every 45 minutes. And they could. They actually own that and the approval. They could do it. And then they could do it for their diesel, the powertrain, and split into modules. So some companies could do it, but it'd need to be an approval for the pilot, and the size of the pilot depends on the understanding and excitement of the executive team, I think. Did I connect with you, Glenn, or did I miss where you're coming from?
Well, you did, you did. And I've been kind of thinking along the same path. You've got to show continuous improvement. So as long as you have a bit of latitude and you prove that you're getting better, if somebody truly cares about profit and teamwork, they should let you run. Whether or not that you get shot down or not, that's up to the organization. If they want to be successful, they'll do it and they'll run with it. You would go and always have AI as part of that, though.
Yes, in 2025, I don't think there's future to the end of the year if you don't.
Okay. Because we're just fixing the bureaucracy and getting high performance teams. But you would not do without AI. Okay.
Okay.
The speed of engineering is just so much more useful. Now, still in 2025 now, if we outsource the work to AI, which you can do, you get uninspiring, crappy products. So I think there's something many people disagree with me on, which is they think you can hand the work to the AI. And where I'm trying to propose AI assisted group work, I think therein lies the magic. And I think that is where the magic is gonna be, even as AI ramps. Like, I don't think this is temporary. I think this is the one and only game for the next few decades. And it's hard to say anything decades with the rate of AI improvement, but my belief, everything I think I've experienced is this is the game. This is the work style that will last the rest of my lifetime.
Until we get AGI, which changes everything again.
Well, then it's AI is not making products for humans. The singularity, the definition of the singularity is without human involvement, the AIs have detached and do what they want to do. And so then it's not AIs making products for humans, it's AIs making products for AIs. So for any products that are still made for humans, forever, I believe the recipe, even after AGI, is a group of 3, 4, or 5 people who want to try to make the best thing in the world and working as quickly with the AGI even as the AGI is willing to give time to the humans, the
I,
boring, slow humans.
I think there's a lot of subtlety that humans will still be able to add insight on for some time. But
I think so too. I don't think AGI is going to make awesome awesome products for humans without human involvement, even AGI. But I think AGI will, by definition, make awesome products for AGI without humans. And that's the idea of the singularity. And whether we've hit that already or not is a question, but soon.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hey, thank you, Glenn.
What did you say, Joe? You said this is the only way that work is going to be done moving forward until we have AGI. You said that Mob AI style of work. Is that what you?
Yeah, I'm talking about Mob AI. 3, 4, 5 humans assisted by I believe is the only way to make inspiring products and or best in class and or best in the world products for humans. And I don't think that's only for 2025. I think that's actually for the next few decades is what I believe based on what I've seen. Not because AI isn't ramping so fast, but I think humans in the loop are useful in an important way to make human products, no matter how good the AI is.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're not just useful. I think they are the only differentiating factor because I didn't want to give a kick in the ants nest earlier when you mentioned all that AI topic. Wanted to leave it alone, but yeah, people are already noticing the mediocrity and the lack of differentiation between the outputs because everybody's using very similarly trained architectures, using in the essence the same models. Even if you put a RAG or fine tuning your own stuff and build your own workflows with lang chains and stuff, the core thing, the only level of intelligence you get comes from the same core part, and that makes you in your work in your company the exact same dumb, blunt, anonymous copy as some other guy on the other side of the world. Why would you do that? And that no, really, people are already complaining. Like marketing materials are becoming dull. Like it's horrible. And so now people are asking themselves, why are we even going to continue investing in this stuff? This is not going to give us any competitive advantage, which is the only reason we invested in this in the first place. That's why companies were waiting it out. They were waiting it out. They didn't want to employ people. They still don't want to. They're waiting it out. But I hope that they're going to come to that realization very soon, so we can get the job market going again, because we need jobs. You know.
I love it, Maru. I love it, Maru. Now, I think if we're not using AI, we won't be able to compete on cost or quality. And if we're not using AI in a useful way, we're not going to compete on quality or cost. But I think if we're only using AI, the we won't be able to achieve human-centered design product or best in class or best in the world product. Those companies, I believe, will be mob AI, whatever they call it. 3, 4, 5 humans in a group working on an independent piece of the company, like it's its own company assisted by AI.
Yeah, you should label it the topology of future work. That's
I think you just did, Maru. Fantastic.
I know I don't give myself the freedom to give in your trademarks a label. It's I trust your marketing powers a lot more than mine. You're much better than me at that.
Mob AI has been very financially successful in 2024. Yeah, thanks, Maru.
Okay, so we are, wow, almost half an hour after over time. Any last minute questions? If not, probably would want to let Joe go and the rest of us go, especially those 4 a.m. people. Now it's 4:30 a.m. I don't think you need to go to sleep anymore. The sun is coming out soon. You might as well just have breakfast. That's it. Um, any last minute questions? No?
Just wondering, we should have a contest to guess what's the next topic of Joe's going to be this year or next year.
Oh boy. By the way, just since you guys actually stay for so much longer, I'm going to give you a little bit of preview of what SFBABAM is doing, because Joe is actually helping us since he talked about all the different car racings and all that, and all the different automobile companies that he has worked in. I have actually asked him to put a panel together. Uh, for example, McLaren, uh, Formula One, they claim that they're Agile shop. Mercedes-Benz Formula One also claimed the Agile shop. BMW Motorsports and others. So Joe is actually reaching out and getting in touch with those companies and get their approvals for them to actually show up in a panel here. And Joe will be actually moderating the panel. So when that happens, I will let all of you know ahead of time so that in case you have any questions ahead of time, then I will feed that into Joe. So that's coming. Another one that is coming is actually the space industry. So SpaceX and others as well. And so that would be another panel that Joe will also be moderating for us. So Joe is actually doing a lot of work for us, just FYI. He's reaching out to all these different people. So now you actually get a preview what is coming later this year. So
So please consider live streaming on X and YouTube, for God's sake. Come on, it's gonna be awesome. Just live stream this stuff. Don't keep it private. Why are we a sect?
no, but then
Okay, I got to ask you, if one of the Formula One teams are using Agile, all have to be, and they're not stupid, so I think they all are. I am going out on a limb.
they're not.
So when I talked for a little piece of this presentation about the origin of racing, can the car be faster than a horse? And in the beginning, the answer was no, right? Those I wasn't alive then, but from everything I've read, those same people that took the car to the field went back to their brick building, took it apart, made another car, changed that car, and there's no schedule for that. You can't because you simply work as quickly as you're inspired to work, as quickly as you have an inspiring idea, you try to get it testable, able to then go back to the field and wait for the horse and then drive again. And that's the definition of agile, right? In racing, the type of racing that feeds engineering, that what racing originally was, and in some cases still is, that never stopped.
Yeah.
Whether they call it agile or not, that never stopped. When I went to Bosch, when they became a supplier of Tesla, um, and I got to work directly with the CEO of Bosch, and this was pretty early in my career, so I was really blown away by that. I've talked about that a few times because I was so shocked, I was so starstruck by meeting Volkmar Denner, the CEO at that time. Volkmar was saying this agile thing that we're doing as a supplier for Tesla now, the formalization of it being called agile is new, but the actual work style in hardware and software is exactly like what we've been doing when we supply race teams. Like Bosch makes steering racks for Formula One teams, and not just steering racks, but they also make steering racks for Tesla. So that's a good example. They make the same part for Tesla and Formula One. They said we just do it the same way. We just never stop the engineering. There's no schedule because you don't know the schedule. As soon as you get data, whatever test session it is, whatever race it is, you get everyone together, so hopefully few people so they can all talk easily, definitely less than 50, hopefully 3, 4, or 5, and say, from this data, do you have any idea of what we can build now? And it's all working sessions. It's like those Finnish kids
Yep.
in 1992. Like, it was never not like that, whether they use the word agile or not. And
Exactly.
part of racing has always been that way.
Exactly.
Now, anytime you have really big budgets, corruption is attractive and MBAs get involved. And so there are entire types of racing that are MBA driven, where they say you can't introduce new product until this time next year. You have to use the same product. It's controlled in this way, but marketing can change, advertisers can change. And in fact, if advertisers change enough, we will add weight to your car without telling you. They basically set the winners based on if Pepsi sponsors a car instead of Coke. Like, it's totally nothing to do. It's not engineering driven.
And
And they'll still call it racing. And that's where
don't,
waterfall makes a lot of sense because you have this marketing plan budget. Pepsi has agreed to be a sponsor at this many hundreds of millions for the next 18 months. So for the next 18 months, these cars have to win and they need to win this percent of the time and in front of this many people. And it becomes totally waterfall, right? So there are things called racing that are run with waterfall, but there are things called racing, exactly as you said, Glenn, that whether they've called it agile or not, we're always this way.
and that's what I was trying to get at. If you have Pepsi controlling a race team, well, they're going to lose. Assuming that there's an agile team out there.
Man, and that's the situation Boeing's in. Basically, the US government is the sponsor, and they're they're not paid based on quality or speed of engineering. That's the entire point of cost plus. It's so broken. The MBAs have won so much that the incentive for superior engineering is actually a negative incentive with cost plus, right? Like that's how corrupt the system is. The laws of physics are still there, but the laws of physics have been completely removed from the majority of the money in most big business worldwide, which is why we have waterfall.
But Tesla is crushing it with SpaceX.
Yeah,
They had to
yeah.
rescue the Boeing crew. Tesla had to go and
But
rescue them.
yes, but if you look at how much money
Exactly.
the United States government gives to the United Launch Alliance or Boeing compared to SpaceX, still, even though SpaceX is crushing it, the overwhelming amount of the money is being put in waterfall contracts for the incumbents because of corrupt practices, basically MBA. And if you look, it's very straightforward. It's these people all went to the same colleges and then they hire each other back and forth. Like it's the definition of a mafia. And people are really complacent and accepting it. You look at the government of New York City and attempting to distinguish a contract to maintain a road or pick up the trash or make a tunnel compared to a mafia dealing. It's impossible to differentiate. And we just think this is normal all around the world, the what we've come to accept it. So if you actually want to make best in the world product, I think Agile is always there. And some racing, for example, actually incents, can you make actually the lightest, most durable steering rack? And then they've never not been Agile.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Joe, what did you say earlier about the comparison of between the way a team operates on a racetrack versus a company? You said that's what they call agile. They do it once and they stop versus you do it every day. Well, I didn't get the idea.
Well, if I'm connecting with where you're coming from, Maru, they a lot of race teams, for example, just never stop engineering. There's no phase. And so your production is definitely as close to the racetrack as possible. Um, I don't know how many people care or are that involved in racing. Clearly, I am. Teams like that, they will very often have mobile factories and semi-trailers, and as many of them as they're allowed to have, and they will fill up the parking lot as close to the paddock, you call it, where the race car is parked, as they're allowed, sometimes physically touching like the part of the semi trailer is stuck in the paddock and they're engineering and machining in there. And in many cases, the drivers are also machining and designing because you want people who are passionate about the full feedback loop, not just part of the game, not just rich kids paying to drive or whatever. When you want to win, when you actually want to win. So if you're allowed to, you want people who understand the engineering who are also working on their driver talent, not people who are only interested in the driving. So you have production basically on the racetrack if it's allowed, as close to that as they can. Um, and you can't have a schedule for that because you don't know when you're going to get some interesting data that will give you an interesting idea. And it might happen halfway through turn one, or it might happen the night before at 1 a.m., or it might happen the night after at 1 a.m., but it's before the next race. So there's no schedule. It's impossible to schedule it. You simply have 24/7 access to the machining and the best software you can. And you hopefully have divided your product into pieces small enough that you can get it done and safely tested well before the next race.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's
So it makes it impossible to schedule. So you have to use burn rate accounting. How much money are we spending versus how much is left? Because you have no idea how much you're going to spend per day. That's completely dependent on what you discover and your rate of inspiration.
mhm. Okay, so it's very different from sprints or something. You do that
Yeah,
continuously.
there's no sprints. Now, racing actually gets close because the races are often on a schedule. And you can call it a sprint. You could choose to call it a sprint until the next race, but that's totally artificial. In a company like SpaceX, there's of course no sprints because there's no scheduled races. They'll launch as soon as they're allowed, and they're always trying to push up the launch dates or have more than one launch in a day. It's definitely not, let's have one launch every 30 days, or let's plan the launches for the year. There's nothing like that. It's who can we launch today? Period, right? There's no schedule. Sprints are totally artificial. Um, However, I think sprints and even all of Scrum, for example, is a great gateway drug that I think works very well to bring people from phases and schedules towards real agile, like what the future crew did, and some of them are still doing, I think. I'll be live in Finland on March 28th. Um, Now, I don't think I get to hang out with the future crew or Darude, um, but there is something about that culture that is occasionally amazing about engineering. And I have to say occasionally, because it's not like most of the world's epic engineering comes from Finland. Actually, a really tiny piece of it occasionally comes from Finland, but it does repeatably every once in a while come from Finland, and way more than the number of humans living there would suggest. There is something special that occasionally happens, so I like to go there when I can. If anybody wants to have a coffee or, depending on the time of day, a beer together live, plan your trip all the way to Finland. March 28th, I'll be at Scan Agile 2025. I rarely go to conferences, even though I'm invited to a lot. Thank you very much. But I prioritize this one for 2025. So that would be a chance for us to shake hands in person or have a coffee or a beer together. And I'm
Awesome.
bringing my kids. So bring your kids if you have them, or borrow someone else's kids if you don't have any. Take them on a life experience.
Can I ask
All
another
right.
question? Ties things together, or do we need to shut it down? I'll
Sorry,
go.
Glenn. Sorry,
I'll
Glenn.
go. Um, is it fair to say that Tesla is rather like a racing company, except on a large scale?
Yes. So it's weird that Elon hasn't caught the racing disease. Elon has zero interest in racing, or at least fights the urge. I requested more than once to set up Tesla Racing when I was an employee, and I was completely shut down immediately every time. And that's part of the Agile Tales. If you want to hear more of the story where that happened, I got to speak with the Agile Tales team about that. Um, so yes, it's run very similarly. So it's strange that Tesla does not directly get involved in racing until you actually think about Elon's 10,000 year goals, colonize other planets. It's really making solar panels more efficient is just as exciting as making cars faster, maybe more exciting. The cars getting faster is basically the marketing, right? Um, the goal is make electric cars more appealing than gasoline cars. So part of that is making a lot of people understand that electric vehicles can be the best vehicles. And some people are convinced by saying, well, look, they're winning on the racetrack. Actually, a lot of people, interestingly, that speaks viscerally to people. And I think because of the history of racing, well, is this automobile actually better than a horse? How can we evaluate that, right? So I think there's some history, there's some real reason that people put faith in racing. But Elon does zero racing. But Elon definitely encourages the engineers to make cars that are going to dominate.
And
Right.
it
But
sounds,
yes, it's run like a race team, Glenn, in my experience. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
But yes, it's run like a racing operation, which I think
That,
was part of your point, Glenn.
yeah, that was my question. Yeah, I suspected that.
All right. So
And
I'm
and
going to
all
shut
my
the.
other clients do have racing operations that do run this way, that they don't allow to run the way they do production.
You know,
Every one of my other clients. And I say, look, you know how to do this. And your other engineers, they want to work this way. If you ask the engineers, would you like to work like the racing teams do? The answer is nearly 100% yes, like over 99%. I'd say it is unanimous, but I'm sure there's someone that said no that I didn't notice. But it's essentially unanimous, very nearly unanimous. They want to do this, they know how to do this. And it's at the executive level, there's so much money to be made by slowing down. So I think the work is hard for us in the transformation space. But when you have executives that actually are incented to do great engineering and win, which does happen sometimes, and then they have to know what this is and be excited about it. And then I think we can do it. I think transformation is absolutely possible.
Yeah, that was my major question of like, why is BMW and Mercedes, they know how to do it in their Formula One and motorsport division. Why are they not doing it in their basically commercial sector division? So anyway, I am shutting this down because obviously we can talk for hours on this. Um, so thank you so very much, everyone, to stay behind. And thank you, Joe, for staying so much extra overtime. And now you know actually what is also coming. Stay tuned. Hopefully you join us for those panel discussion. And for next month, hope to see you all since we do have 3 people actually will be here. So those are not the 3 easiest people to get on their calendar. Let me put it this way. So that was not an easy feat to do. So, all right, nobody's going to sue us. Thanks, Chris.
The, the chat is amazing.
Like,
Thank you, everybody. Please connect with me on X if you don't mind. I actually really like that, and I'm pretty responsive, so we can talk about anything anytime. And tell me what you're passionate about. You don't have to listen to me, but do connect with me on X if you don't mind.
all right. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Moy.